Welcome to Season 2 of ADHD Difference. I'm your host, Julie Legg, ADHD advocate, author of The Missing Piece, a woman's guide to understanding, diagnosing and living with ADHD, and an unapologetic doer of many things. This season, we're turning up the volume with a global lineup of brilliant guests, bringing their lived experiences, insights, research, strategies and resources. And of course, along with a healthy dose of humour and humility. Whether you're neurodivergent yourself or just curious, there's something here for every curious brain. Let's dive in. Meet Greer Jones. She's the host of the Unfinished Idea podcast and the founder of the Unfinished Idea community, where she supports parents raising neurodivergent children. As a mum to a son with autism and ADHD, and part of a neurodivergent couple herself, she knows firsthand the joys and challenges of navigating the neurodiverse world. Through her podcast, writing, and resources, Greer creates a space where families can feel seen, supported, and reminded that they're not alone. Her passion is helping families find community, break down isolation, and embrace their unique journeys with honesty and hope. Welcome to the show, Greer.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's nice to see you again. Diving straight into the questions. So you're not only a podcast host, but also a mum of neurodivergent children. Can you take us back to when ADHD first became part of your story?
Yeah, so there's kind of two starts to my story. So my son, who's now 6, he was diagnosed with ADHD and autism, but with ADHD about 2 years ago now. And we knew before that. So we knew from kind of age 2 that he was just receiving and processing the world differently. So we didn't really know what exactly that was. You know, we were like, is this ADHD? Is this autism? You know, like we didn't know what that was, but we kind of just did that. And so really is that was kind of when I started diving into what ADHD is. And, you know, I mean, I have an education degree. So I had a very short module on additional needs, which ADHD was included in that. But that was a 2-hour lesson on the whole spectrum of all the spectrums. So you can imagine how in-depth that was. But yeah, so just diving into that and really looking at that and what does ADHD mean. And a lot of that information was about boys, I'll just be honest. And so I never really thought about it for me until I was in the thick of it with my son. So my son's been diagnosed with both ADHD and autism, and I kind of just went into a bit of a spiral of kind of life and just grief and all of that. And I was listening to an author. Her book is called It All Makes Sense, or Now It All Makes Sense, something like that, by, I can't even think of her name. I'll think of it. But I was listening to it. I was listening to it as an audiobook, and the amount of times that I felt like she was reading my life. What, like the whole book, I was like, oh my gosh, she just wrote a book on my life and we've never met. Like she lives halfway around the world. And so that was when I kind of started diving into what ADHD looks like for women or girls, and realized it's massively different, and realized that obviously this is not for everyone, but for most boys, it's more the physical running around. I mean, we kind of joke, you don't even sit in the room with my son. You're just in the room with my son, and you can see within 10 minutes, he's bouncing off the walls, moving from thing to thing, like very classic boy ADHD, and just very like the physical side of ADHD. Whereas for girls and women, it's more the mental side of ADHD and the like constant. So I always said, my eyes are open, my brain is on at 100 miles an hour. Like I don't need a warming up time. I am on, which can be great, except at 2 a.m. when your son wakes up and you're then up and your brain's like, oh, we're waking up now. Okay, let's go for the day. But yeah, so things like that, I just thought, oh, that was just me. That was normal. That was it. No one else is doing this. Like, you know, things like that. the fact that I have an ideas journal next to my bed because of the amount of ideas that I have. Um, so things like that, I just kind of assumed, oh, that was just a normal thing. And then realizing it wasn't, it kind of then made sense, made my life
Mm.
sense. And so, yeah, it kind of has opened my eyes to see how different ADHD in women is, which that's a whole, yeah, that's a whole nother topic.
Isn't it
And,
just? And have
um,
you been formally assessed?
yeah, so I got, so in the UK, we have obviously the NHS, and then we have through that the right to choose. So I did the right to choose option, which was way quicker. And just means you kind of go a slightly different route, but it's the same thing. And yeah, so I got assessed about a year ago, not quite a year ago. And it was really freeing. I mean, unfortunately in the UK, particularly for adults who get a late diagnosis, there's not a lot of support for adults. And so so my husband, for example, he's autistic. He, in his mind, is never going to go and get assessment because there's no support. There's no point. Like, he's like, I don't get anything for having this piece of paper. Whereas for me, I needed it just to prove I wasn't crazy. Because so many people were like, oh, you can't. Once I had the diagnosis and was kind of starting to tell people were like, no, you aren't. You can't. Like, and then they'd fill in a reason why I couldn't have ADHD, like, and some of it was, oh, let me explain why. For example, I'm never late to a meeting, but that's because I was once late and felt so much shame that now I'm like 15 minutes early. Like I go the opposite, like so yeah, but
I'm nodding profusely because that's
yeah.
exactly right. And I think as an adult being diagnosed later, we've already put in so many strategies, whether they're positive ones, but they work for us, and we don't even know why, but we do.
Yep.
So yeah,
Exactly.
very,
Yeah.
very interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
carry on.
Yeah. And I mean, I look back now and think like, oh yeah, I made that accommodation for myself. So I always put a deadline for like when I was at uni or college, I'd put a deadline a week before in my calendar. Like, so I'd go through the start of the term and put all the deadlines a week before they actually were, because I knew if I didn't have that pressure, like I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it till the night before, which I knew I needed a little bit of buffer time to like write good papers or study for a quiz or something. Um, and so, yeah, I would trick my brain to do that. So it's like lots of things that I didn't realize I was making accommodations for, but just thought, oh, that's how I work. That was just me. So I got formally diagnosed, yeah, about a year ago, and it has been very freeing and very, uh, yeah, I think freeing is the best word. I think there's lots of little things that have come up with it, with um, kind of looking back on my life. I've done a lot of that this past year as well, of like looking back at different scenarios and different kind of memories and thinking through, oh, that's why I reacted that way, or that's why
Mm,
this was harder or easier, or
mm.
which is hard. It's like it brings up a lot, but I also think it's put me in a position where I can talk about my past and not and I don't want to think my past wasn't bad. I didn't have a bad childhood or growing up or anything, but I can now look at it with a little bit more compassion, I think, and a little more, oh yeah, this it just the amount of times I've said, oh, this makes sense now this last year.
This unpacking is really common too, to really reframe some memories and look at them in a different light or through a different lens, a particular situation or a reaction that you may have had, adding your ADHD layer to that. Now you know what it's all about, and
Yeah.
thinking, of course that was my reaction. Of course that's why I might have quit that job or threw away that friend set or was emotionally upset over this incident that appeared to be very small in everyone else's mind. So
Yeah.
it's a great process. Going back to your assessment in the UK, how long did you
Mhm.
have to wait? What's your waiting time for an assessment?
So if you go through the NHS, it's like 3 years. But because I did the right to choose, which is still free, and I recommend this to anyone. I literally was saying to someone at the school gate today, I was like, oh, right to choose. It made it down to about 8 weeks. for assessment, and then another like 3 weeks for final confirmation.
And
If
why
I'm
is there such a huge difference between the two?
Yeah. So, one, because people don't know about the right to choose. It's kind of a hidden secret in the UK, which I don't know why, because I don't know. It's the NHS. I don't know a lot of things about the NHS. And my husband works for them and he's still baffled by things. But so yeah, some of it people don't know that they can because everything is done by NHS. The other thing is it can be so you'll get the process for right to choose is you go to your GP and say, I want to do right to choose. This is why, blah, 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 blah. And they have to sign a form. Um, and sometimes a doctor can deny that because they can, for whatever reason, they do have to give a reason, but they can technically deny it. So I went in very clear saying I was not seeking to take medication for my ADHD. That, I mean, I went in with like a whole spiel. So I recommend writing down why you think you have ADHD, what you want the outcome to be. Like, as in, like, are you wanting to be medicated? Are you not wanting to be medicated? Are you wanting to seek further help or, advice and things like that? So I just went in and gave him all of that information, particularly why I thought I had ADHD and why, particularly for women, it's hard to diagnose. And I probably taught him more than he realized, but it was good. It was a good conversation. And then from that, you go and pick a provider, but not all providers will. So if you do want to later do medicine, not all providers on the right to choose are a full diagnosis because what they can do is give you a quote unquote recommend diagnosis of like what they believe you have, but it's not a full diagnosis. So that's the other thing just to say is like make sure that wherever you go, it's a full diagnosis recognized by the NHS. Because that's the other thing is sometimes people kind of get tricked, which so right to choose doesn't always have the best name because of you got to read the fine print.
Mm.
But yeah, so it's just a private company. It's free. You just type in you get a special code with your right to choose form, and you type that in. So it's still free. It's still all done. It's just, yeah, you have to do a little bit more of the research and you have to be proactive, which as an ADHD person, that might not be the strongest thing you have. But yeah, when you want it, you get it. So yeah.
Awesome. Also very interesting. Myself with my assessment as well. I opted before the assessment that I wouldn't be taking medication. And so that pathway was a lot faster going
Hmm.
through a psychologist rather than a psychiatrist in New Zealand. So yeah, it really did cut that waiting time. Greer, can you tell me more about your podcast, The Unfinished Idea?
Yes, I would love to. The unfinished idea started really just with the idea of trying to share the everyday about the everyday and being a neurodivergent family and what that kind of looks like for us, and realizing that our everyday is different and the world doesn't always see that. And so, kind of just wanting to be honest and open. And so, having conversations with people, about the everyday, conversations about their journey, conversations about kind of what their life looks like and how they've experienced life, because I think there's power in stories. And so, yeah, kind of sharing that. So, yeah, it's a weekly podcast for anyone. The whole aim is for kind of people who are living the everyday to feel seen and heard, but then also for those who are kind of supporting them. So grandparents, aunts, uncles, best friends. It's also for them where they can kind of learn and grow and see a little bit more of what every day looks like.
That's brilliant. Thank you. And the links will be in the show notes for our listeners. For someone who's deeply immersed in storytelling, whether it's through the unfinished idea or the work that you're doing around neurodiversity, support for children in the UK, what's currently fueling your fire? What are you into at the moment?
Yeah, so I I kind of stumbled into advocating for others. So just a little bit of a backstory. I We had a really difficult time with our son in the school. Lots of things that were not done correctly. A long story cut very short. one day I went to our SENCO, which is our special education needs coordinator. So they're the ones who coordinate all the help that children need in school. And I said, I want to meet other moms like me, because I was like, statistically, I am not the only one in this whole school who has a child like mine. Like, I want to meet other moms. So we started a coffee morning and invited any parent. It was for any parent, but in the UK at least, it is mostly moms who are doing this. So it was moms who came. And from that, we started a WhatsApp group, and we've kind of met up every so often. Some of the kids now have moved on to secondary school, so the parents have left the group, which is very sad. It was a little emotional. But yeah, so from that, realizing, one, my child wasn't obviously the only one going through this, so having a support group. But two, also just hearing how there's a lot of inconsistencies happening in our school. And then we kind of met up with some other moms from other schools that are kind of local to us, and just again hearing the amount of inconsistencies that were happening. And I was just like, there has to be something has to change. Like, this isn't okay. How can one child not have to wear a uniform, but another child does, but that child, all the things. It was just very inconsistent. And so from that, kind of just starting to say, hey, I'm happy to come in and help you in a meeting, or I'm happy to sit quietly in a meeting and help you. Because sometimes you just need someone afterwards to be like, this is what they said. And that other person, kind of being like, oh, I've heard it this way, just bouncing off that kind of thing. And so from that, again, just learning more about, so the EHC process, which is our educational healthcare plan, which is the plan that you get when your child needs support. And it means that the government then gives funding to the school. So to get that plan, parents have to go fill out 1,000,001 forms. About 5 people have to observe the child, and all write reports. You have a big meeting to confirm all the reports. You then submit it to your local authority, or the local council government. And they, unfortunately, about 80% of the time deny it. They just right out deny it. And they do that because it costs them money. I'm just going to be honest. And so then you have to go through tribunal, and you have to fill out more forms and have more observations and have more meetings. And it's a very long process. And I just was like, in the end, what a lot of councils do is the night before you go to tribunal, so you're supposed to go to an actual place and have this meeting, and it again costs, usually the night before the council will succeed and you get the EHCP. But you've now delayed it by about 6 months. You've cost about £2,000 to £3,000 extra because of all the different people and agencies involved. And so our experience of that was very similar. That was pretty, I've just summed up my experience, but that is the experience of hundreds of thousands of parents. And statistics came out about a year ago, about a year ago, that said councils lose or succeed 99% of their EHCP tribunals, and the 1% they do quote unquote win, it's shown that parents they've decided they don't want to continue the process. So it's not that they've actually won, it's just that parents have stopped the process, if that makes sense. So that that's really what fueled my fire. That's a long way to say that's what really fueled my fire of the councils, the local authorities, the government are basically putting parents and families through so much turmoil, so much frustration, so much just negligence. I think it's just that, that's not okay. Just so that they can quote unquote potentially save some money. And so I started meeting with our council. I met with our local MP and was like, what are you doing about this? What are you doing to change this? Here are the statistics, here's the things. And they were, I don't know, they had thoughts about it. We'll just say we didn't always agree. So I took it higher. So I went to my, so not just my local council kind of MP, but then my area MP, which is the bigger government. and again said, what are you doing about this? Here's how many children in your constituency who are on, who have current EHCPs. Here's the current number of people applying for them. What are you doing? And through that process, I then met this other group called Let Us Learn Too, who were fighting for the same thing. And met up with them. It was like, okay, what are we going to do to change this? Because that's when I think I was very aware of my area in England. And I knew this was happening across the country, but to hear there's a group of 6 mums, to hear that we all went through the same thing and we've all contacted our MPs. We've all done the same steps, but across England, and change isn't really happening. We need to make a bit more, if that makes sense. And so we put together a rally, which happened just over a week ago, which is weird to think that it feels so long ago, but yet equally doesn't feel that long, in front of Parliament to say enough is enough. And when we started kind of putting the word out and sharing our kind of vision and thoughts and stuff, we didn't really know what was going to happen, because the media in the UK is very hit and miss when it comes to supporting children with additional needs. We've had headlines where it's been the government needs to reform and change it, and when we've had headlines where it's like they're a drain on society. So it's very hit and miss and very hard. So we weren't really sure what was going to happen. We weren't sure. Yeah. But because of our relationships with our MPs, we got to make some noise. So our MPs all backed it, all backed the rally. They actually all came, which was really encouraging. We actually, in the end, so we had a rally and then we had a drop-in time where they could ask more questions. So in the whole day, we saw about 60 MPs, I think, around then, I think, if I'm correct. Yeah, so which was amazing to hear. Like, this was really something that they couldn't shy away from, because of the amount of noise online that we were kind of making, and not just, I mean, the community of a lot of mamas online kind of raising noise and sharing and being like, yeah, we need to change. Like, I think that helped. We set up templates for people to like click a form basically that they could then automatically send to their MP. So I know my MP was saying that he's like, oh, I basically feel like I'm being not in a bad way. He was kind of joking, like being attacked because the amount of emails he was receiving from his constituents that were all the same. It was just this form that people were just like filling out, which I was like, yeah, this is great. Like, I thought it was fun. But yeah, and then in the end, we had about 700 people come to the rally.
Brilliant.
Which was amazing. And it's right in front of Parliament. And it was really just an opportunity for people to come together. I mean, I think what I took away from it was two things. One, meeting people that I know online, I've only interacted with online or on a screen. Seeing them in person, there's just like a whole different vibe and just togetherness of that. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's like, I don't know, there was this big vibe and energy of just like, we are one and we all have different journeys, we all have different stories, but we all get it and we all know how hard this is. And so that was really fun. It sounds weird to say, but fun. And then the two was just the noise. We weren't loudness, not like the actual noise, but there was so much media there. There was so many MPs were there, just, and even passerbyers. So I kind of stayed on the outside of the kind of rally area, and the amount of people who were like, oh, what are you trying to do? Like, what are you rallying for? What are you protesting? And to kind of have those conversations with people was really interesting, because everyone was shocked that the government make it so hard. One, so our rally was two things. One, they make it so hard to get support, and two, they're trying to cut the support. So not only like trying to say like, let's make this easier, but they're also saying like, we don't need to support these children. So yeah, it was amazing to hear the public kind of also stand up, and we had people join in who like weren't planning on it. They're, like, we had this whole tourist group come for like half hour, 45 minutes, because they're like, yeah, no, this is important. Like, and they're from Canada. Like, I was like, okay, cool. So yeah, so that's a really long-winded answer, slightly an ADHD answer of saying, like, yeah, it's just change needs to happen in the UK, and I am happy to be a voice for that. And so I'm going to use my voice for that. I'm going to stand up and say, this isn't okay. And it started with my son, and then it started with the kind of area, and then now it's moved to the whole country, which it's a lot, but it's exciting.
That's wonderful how you've identified a problem, you've taken ownership of doing something about it, using your voice and your understanding of the system, driving further, getting momentum with others, creating a rally, making some noise out there in the media to identify some of the problems that you have there in the UK. That's amazing progress, and that's very exciting that
Yep.
a number of voices can actually start to make change. Ultimately, what are the next steps in your vision here? Is there a time frame, or what's the next step?
Yeah. So the reason we did the rally last Monday was because Parliament was in Parliament, so they could actually hear us and see us. And also because we have something called the white papers, which is the plan, basically. And they came out a few days ago. And basically it was to set out what the plan is for education. The white papers is all kind of about that. That was probably why we wanted to do it before then,
Mm,
obviously,
mm,
because then we could hopefully make a bit of noise to say, like, let's make sure these are included in your plans. So I feel hopeful. I always say that not hesitantly, but with a little asterisk, because they definitely heard us, and they definitely are like, yes, we need to invite parents into the conversations. We need to think about these kind of key area, like different areas of the support that children get. So very hopeful in that they are moving in the right direction. Words are great, but action is
mm,
the truth, if that makes sense. And so it's kind of now we're just kind of waiting, like, okay, are they going to actually take action?
mm,
Or are they just kind of saying good things so they can say nice things? So right now we're kind of just in a waiting period. There's different things that come into effect at different times over the year. So they've said, like, I believe it's October, November, they're going to start moving this plan along. And so we're kind of hopeful for that, and just kind of waiting for that timeline to see, okay, do they mean it, or are they just saying good things or nice things? So
I'm just wondering briefly if you could explain what some areas of support actually would look like within the school or the classroom arena. Um, what really would make a difference to neurodiverse children?
yeah, so I think well, one is your area definitely depends on what you can access, and wanting to kind of make that so you can access anything wherever you are. So we are in an area that thankfully has a lot of access to things, so we can get so things like so my son does play therapy, art therapy, and music therapy all within school. And he has access to that. Whereas if he were to go to the county over to us, he wouldn't get access to any of that.
Um,
And so some of that is just trying to equalize the access for everyone, which I think, yes, that's definitely needed, because, yeah, that's good. The other thing is just the whole process. So um, I'll be honest, if I wasn't on top of it, my son wouldn't get the support he needed as quickly as he got it, because I was the one that said, okay, this deadline has now not been met. You now have this time for him to meet it. And if not, I'll take this further, basically. And that's, I don't know a lot of parents who do that, because partly because a lot of people are working, lots of jobs. I'm in a position where I have flexible hours. So, I could do that. I could meet,
mm,
I could go to school at the amount of times I've had school call me and say, oh, could you come in for this meeting in half an hour? And I can say, yep, because I live 7 minutes from the school. So that helps, So things like that, I think as well, just the
Mm,
whole process of trying to, I don't want to say equalize the process, but in the sense of making it so parents don't have to jump through so many hoops. I mean, again, because of the work I do around neurodiversity and advocating for support, I knew what evidence I needed.
mm.
So when in meetings, I would go in and say, like, okay, here's the evidence that you need before they even asked it.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much for sharing that. It sounds really exciting and involved, and obviously something I'm very passionate about. And so good on you for putting all those hours and your voice to be an advocate. Because I know that life with ADHD brings challenges, of course. And I'd like to ask you about a tool or a strategy that you use to keep you grounded, especially when things get overwhelming.
So one thing that I do, which again, looking back, I'm like, oh yeah, this makes sense, is so instructions. Don't tell me instructions. Like verbal instructions, I'll get to maybe step two. I'll do the first step after. I'm like, what? So something that I always say is text me instructions, and write down one and then do, two, whatever. Like, and I have always said, you just text me the instructions. Don't right, like right now, just stop where, instead of you telling me, just write them out and text them to me. And that has helped so many times, particularly because my husband, he was autistic. He is very, very direct, very like, I say he's a bit of a robot. So he'll, walk 10 steps and then turn left, like you lost me at 10 steps. Like, like I get to 10 steps and be like, oh, what am I supposed to do? So writing, like having him text those to me, it just helps release any arguments, it helps me so I don't get overwhelmed by what I'm supposed to be doing. And he's also able to be very black and white in his instruction giving because he can say, walk 10 steps and then turn left. Yeah. So I'd say write down or have someone text the instructions to you. The other thing is this is one that I do, but also recommend, even if you don't have ADHD, but you're raising an ADHD child, is to do breathing, grounding breathing, or kind of breathing techniques. So I do a lot of like name 5 things that I can see, 4 things that I can hear, 3 things that I can touch, 2 things that I can smell, and 1 thing that I can taste. And just doing that helps me in time, particularly so noise gets very overwhelming. And so when I'm like sometimes when I'm shopping at the grocery store, I try not to go on a Saturday because that's when everyone and their dog goes. But if I need to go on a Saturday for some reason and I can't start to get overwhelmed, um, then I'll even sometimes just stop in the aisle, or I'll like pick up something and like look like I'm reading the ingredients, but I'm not. I'm going through the 5 steps, like, and I've done that as well with my child when he's having a meltdown,
Mm.
taking a moment to make sure he's safe, kind of trying to step out a little bit and go through that process to help me just to calm, just to breathe, and kind of just, yeah, let my body to kind of settle back down.
That sounds like a micro mindfulness moment, isn't it? When you're
Yeah,
forced,
yeah.
and not just to breathe, but forced to think of something that we do well and our sensories are great, and to think and stop and hear and touch, and that, yeah, really centers us back to this grounding level, which you
Yeah.
mentioned. Oh, great. That's a great tip. Thank you very much. If there's a parent with a child that's just received an ADHD diagnosis, you having been in that situation yourself, what would you like that parent to hear?
That they're not alone,
Mm,
that it can be overwhelming, it can be isolating, it can be so many things. But the one thing is, they're not alone. There's
mm,
a whole community of mamas, of parents who are out there to support you and to say, I think back to when I started this journey, I'm so grateful for the people that have fed into me, but then also I get to feed into as well. We get to learn kind of from everyone. So to say you're not alone in this. And the second thing would be that your child isn't lazy and you're not a bad parent. The amount of times I've heard that about my son is either he's
mm.
lazy or I'm a bad parent is overwhelming. Partly when we got his diagnosis, I had a bit of a shame spiral because I thought that was true. I was a bad parent. That's why he has this, which is not true at all. That's what you hear. That's what you believe. And so just to say that those two things are not true, that your child is wired differently and processes the world differently, but they have a purpose, and their ADHD is not a lazy thing or that you're a bad parent. It's just they're wired differently, and that's okay.
And on that note, Greer, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your insights and what's happening in the UK. It's been marvelous chatting. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been really fun.